Go ahead, Liz. Are you gonna dance at
A
all?
lot has been reported and said about World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and the Gulf War. Not too much has been said about the Cold War, and there was a lot of guys in the longest war we've been in, which was the Cold War. In 1957, I graduated from high school. I was kind of a rudderless guy, didn't plan on going to college, had a McJob, and I knew that the draft was looming down the road. Back in those days, when you turned 23 or 24, you were drafted. So when I turned 18, I went to our local draft board, I signed up and I volunteered for the draft. I was inducted in October of 1957, shipped to Fort Knox, Kentucky. That's where I was brought in. While in Fort Knox, Kentucky, where we were tested and got all of our gear, I was standing in a chow line one day, and I heard the most god-awful noise I ever heard in my life coming down the road. And I turned to look. It was an M48 tank, and I was awestruck by the power of that machine and the way it looked. It affected me for the rest of my military career. After being tested and whatnot, Fort Benning, Georgia, Sand Hill. At that time, the 3rd Infantry Division was stationed at Fort Benning, and attached to them was the 7th Cavalry. The 7th Cavalry that Custer was involved with. It was a recon outfit at that time, and recon platoons were kind of different. I have a picture here of the recon platoon. Okay, this is in Fort Benning. This is the recon platoon. This is an M41 tank, and that's me leaning up against the gun right there. And a recon platoon then was made up of 2 tanks, 2 APCs, and 6 scout vehicles. 2 tanks were M41 light tanks. It was called the Bulldog, the Mitchell Bulldog, named after General Mitchell, who was killed in Korea. The M41 was the fastest tank we had and the lightest tank. It was 25 tons. It was designed for air drop. It was the fastest tank we had. It did almost 50 miles an hour. It had a 76 millimeter gun, a 50 caliber on top, and a 30 caliber coax machine gun with the gun. A crew of 4, and the loader, driver, tank commander, and gunner. The M41 was used primarily in recon. The other 2 vehicles, the APCs, one was a infantry squad, and the other one was a mortar squad. The 6 Jeeps were scout Jeeps. We were the eyes and the ears of the 3rd Division. We did flanking, rear guard, that type of thing. We were trained there and then shipped over to Germany from Savannah on the USNS Guide. Our whole platoon went over. Back in those days, whole divisions were replaced. The 3rd Division went over and replaced another division that was there. I mean, it rotated back. 14 days after we sailed, we landed in Bremerhaven, Germany, and by convoy went to Bamberg, Germany. Bamberg was a little town then. It's quite a thriving town now. It's located right on the Main River, about 39 km from Nuremberg. It's in southern Germany. While we were there, our primary duty was border patrol. Also, when we got there, we got rid of our M41s, and we went to the M48 medium tank. That was the Patton. That was the 3rd tank named after General Patton. The M48 was a medium tank, 50 tons, had an 800 horsepower Continental engine. It was a 12-cylinder. It would do about 30 miles an hour. It had a 90 millimeter gun, and a crew again of 4. All these tanks had fixed ammunition, and the ammunition was usually carried in the tanks. In fact, when we were in Germany, the tanks were armed at all times, live ammunition on the tanks at all times, because we were subject to being alerted and put out into the field right away. Primary duty for us was a relief of border patrol outfits. There were outfits assigned to border patrol, and we would relieve those guys for their R&R. When we went up to the border, most of the time, because we had tanks, we were checkpoints. They would just park our tank at a checkpoint, which normally would have barriers and concertina wire. We were on one side, and the East Germans were on the other. In the American sector, the border was less than 100 miles, but still we had to patrol it all. We just sat in our tanks for 8 hours a day. They sat over there in their tanks. The guys would walk back and forth. But one thing about the East German Army, they were much more better equipped than we were. Their equipment was outstanding, and when it came to chow time, we would eat our K rations or C rations left over from Korea. These guys had a truck bring them up hot food. They were chowing, and they would kind of rub it in our faces. The border, at that time, the Berlin Wall had not been built yet. The Berlin Wall wasn't built until '61. But we had a long border, which they called the plowed strip. It ran for our whole section. It was about 50 feet wide, had on each side of it, there was 12-foot link chain link fence with concertina wire on top. It was called the plowed strip because every day the East Germans would plow the land between the two fences so they could see any footprints of anybody coming across at night. There was also machine gun towers, spotlight towers. They were located approximately 100 to 150 feet, always within a line of sight of another tower. We did not patrol that, but our scouts did, because the jeeps that I mentioned before, they would patrol the border. A couple of funny things occurred when I was in training. One time, a couple of Iranian generals, we were friendly with the Iran people at that time, came to Fort Benning to see us attack a hill, live fire. As we were attacking, one of our mortar crews seemed to mess up, and they dropped a live mortar round right on top of one of our tanks. And of course, it didn't do much to hurt the tank, but those guys didn't hear it much for a couple of days. We have I have another picture here of what the outfit looked like in Germany. This is an M48 tank. And this is in Germany when we went to the M48 tanks. And in this one, I am fourth from the rear. This is we're all cleaned up at this time. At those pictures, you'll see the lieutenant sitting in the Jeep in front of the two pictures. That's Lieutenant Pete Petrarca was his name. Funny story about Pete was we were firing the tanks one time in Fort Gordon. We had to take the tanks from Fort Benning to Fort Gordon to fire them. We were firing the tanks, and of course the lieutenant had to know everybody's job. So he got in the tank as a loader. A loader's job is very, very dangerous because when you're inside the tank, you're sitting on a little seat. You have your ready racks with all the ammo here. Load the gun, slam it home. The breech block comes up. When it's fired, the shell kicks out. It recoils all the way back to about maybe 2 inches from the back of the turret. In the back of the turret is a chain mail cover that the ammo, the empty round would hit and then fall out into a reservoir where later on the loaders always wore asbestos gloves so you could pick them up and throw them out of the tank. Lieutenant Petrarca was in there doing that one day. He loaded it, fired, went back, hit, went down and hit the ground and bounced back up and hit him right around here. And it branded him. That was a red one. From that day on, he was called Peter the Hot Round Eater. He never lived that one down. The 7th Cav went on, of course it was quite famous early, but it went on to much more battles. The one that you would like to see if you learn about the 7th Cavalry in Vietnam was in a place called La Drang, where they were practically wiped out, the 7th Cav. And there's a movie made out of by Mel Gibson called We Were Soldiers Once. That tells really close about what happened to the 7th Cav in Vietnam. That's it. Any questions, guys?
How many rounds could you hold in each tank?
There was, in the ready rack again, there was approximately 8 rounds in the ready rack, and all the rest were stored behind the turret. approximately 25 rounds on that. HE, high explosive, armor piercing, smoked, and white phosphorus. Those are the 4 rounds that we had. And of course, like I said, you had the 50 on top, you had the 30, which was coax mounted. Coax means it was actually mounted to the gun. So wherever the turret went, the gun went also.
And could we have defended the border in East Germany if,
We had a lot of troops over there then, yes.
so there was some backup for you, obviously, close by in case they wanted to?
Yeah, well, it was very, very mobile. Yeah, there was a lot of troops there. It did get there very fast, yeah. Almost like Korea today with the border. Any other questions?
Well,
Good job.